Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over the Datsun 510 rear suspension kit. We're going to be going over what's included, the optional dust boots, the construction of them, our QC process, base settings, and our color options that we have available. So to start, we're going to go over what's included. The first thing you're going to have is our vacuum sealed hardware pack. You're going to have our rear cross member, our rear trailing arms, and our rear mustache bar, and the upper and lower links. Now, something to note is that we don't have the bushings pressed into the rear crossmember or the rear mustache bar. They do come with bushings, and the rear crossmember ones come installed. Next, we're gonna go over the optional dust boots. The dust boots are these rubber dust boots. They don't come pre-installed on the links or the trailing arms, but they are just rubber dust boots that go over the bearing surfaces. They would be 10 of these, one for each one of the bearings and the trailing arm bearings. And they just slip over them, and this protects them from any road debris, grit and grime if you plan to daily drive them. If it's a show car that's only going to get a couple hundred miles a year, then you don't necessarily need them, but we do recommend them for daily use. Next, we're going to go over the construction of the 510 rear kit. We got the rear crossmember, the trailing arms, and the mustache bar. These are all going to be tubular steel. That's going to be all welded together. The upper and lower links are aluminum. Now they are scalloped tubes, so that makes them extremely strong and rigid. Next, we're going to go over the QC process of our rear suspension kit. So this is to ensure that we have good fit, form, and function for the end user, so that way the customer is as happy as he can be and doesn't have any unexpected surprises along the way. So the first part is going to be our packing list accuracy. We want to make sure that whether it's the hardware sheet or suspension components, if they ordered the dust boots or not, that it's all together and that it's all there. And if there is anything missing, we want to make sure we note that before we ship it out, or let the customer know that he's going to have another package coming in the near future. The second step of our QC process is going to be a hardware sheet. We want to make sure all the bolts, washers, nuts, misalignment spacers are all in there. If there's anything missing, we want to make sure we don't ship the order, or if there's anything small that's missing, let the customer know ahead of time and we can ship it to them right away after it's in stock. Next, we're going to go over the cosmetic threshold. Cosmetic threshold is going to make sure that there's no chips, stings, or dents on any of the powder-coated surface or any of the aluminum surfaces, and just to make sure overall the finish of the product is really well. Something to keep in mind is that the heavier items, especially like the rear cross member or these rear mustache bar, if they're a little bit on the heavier side, we do have to use a little bit of a thicker hook. So sometimes you will notice a small hook mark. We will try to hit it with a paint pen, but sometimes you'll notice a hook mark, and I don't know where this one is, but maybe in one of the sway bar brackets. So something to consider is that you might have a small cosmetic defect just from having to hook it for the powder coating process. The next process is going to be our hole tolerances. So we have a keychain here with all the holes that we use to our suspension parts. This is just used to make sure that the powder coating is not too thick or too thin. We want to make sure that the holes are free of any BBs. Now, something to keep in mind is depending on the powder that we do choose, some of the tolerances might be on the smaller size. You will still be able to push it through, but there might be just a little bit of powder that's going to be in the way, which you might have to hit the bolt through with a mallet to be able to clear that powder out. The next step is going to be the machine surfaces. Well, the only real machine surfaces on the rear suspension kit is going to be the bearing surfaces. These are crucial because these do fit the factory bearings and the seals. So the biggest thing that we want to look for is to make sure that there's clear, no BBs, very little, if any, powder coat at all that's going on the seal, and absolutely no powder coat or no BBs that is going on the bearing surface itself. We want to make sure that that's all clear, so then the customer is able to press in a bearing really, really easily. The next QC step is going to be the threads. It's going to be all the rod end threads. It's going to be the threads for the shock mount and anywhere else where there might be a thread. We want to be able to make sure that we are able to adjust these by hand, that there's no grit or anything in the sandblasting process that made its way into the threads, preventing the threads from turning or galling up over time. The next part is going to be our bushings. We want to make sure that we apply the correct bushings. We do pre-install the bushings on the rear cross member, so that is a part of our QC process, that we know that we supply the right bushings. But in this case, also the rear mustache bar bushings, that we want to ensure that that's the correct ones that we're sending. The final step of the QC process is going to be the hole-to-hole location on the parts that mount to the actual chassis. The way we came up with that dimension, we 3D scanned a couple of Datsun 510s, and as well as looked at repair diagrams for the 510 to figure out the exact stud-to-stud location. So we have these CNC laser cut aluminum panels, and these have pucks on the bottom that perfectly seat inside the bushing cups, and we're able to use that to see if they completely fall into the bushing cup, then we know that this will pass. Now, something to consider is that we do allow for plus or minus of an 1/8 inch tolerance just due to the welding process. It shouldn't affect anything when we go to install on the car because they do have polyurethane bushings, so it should still be really easy to be able to mount on the car. But just note that if you have a car that's damaged or has been in an accident, please reach out to us and we can provide you the stud locations for these particular parts. Next, we're going to go over the base settings to set the suspension up. This is going to be for anyone running to factory to about 2 to 3 inches lower than factory as a starting setting. On the mustache bar in the upper link, we have the middle hole, the bottom hole, the top hole on the trailing arm, and the singular hole on the trailing arm for the lower link. We have the middle hole chosen for the trailing arm to the crossmember. This will get you to the alignment shop until they can figure out exactly figure out exactly how to tune your car to your specific needs. Now, the next thing is going to be how far out you want of exposed thread. So as you know, these are right hand thread on one side and left hand thread on the other side. This makes it extremely easy to twist these one way, and all of a sudden you have your camber that's able to be adjusted. You could twist it away to reduce your camber. You can turn both at the same time, and this will adjust your toe, and you can adjust your double adjuster on your trailing arm, and this will adjust your caster in your wheel well. Now, to adjust all these settings, we'll recommend leaving about a 1/2 inch of exposed thread on all the links and the trailing arm. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this out, and then as we tighten up the jam nuts, you can see between the amount of exposed thread, you wanna have about a 1/4 inch of exposed thread past the jam nut. Same thing goes for the trailing arm to the crossmember. You want about a 1/4 inch of exposed thread past the jam nut. Next, we're gonna go over our color options. This is our standard gloss gray color. It's a very neutral color. It doesn't allow your suspension to really be too in your face, and overall provides a good balance for the car in our opinion. Now, if you wanted something that's a little more out there, or you wanted to see the different colors that we have, take a look at the video over there. And if you wanna see our thorough installation instructions on a Datsun 510, take a look at the video down there. If you have any other questions, always be sure to give us a call or email us. Thanks again.